Welcome back. Over the last couple of weeks, I've published 2 articles. The first is effective interval training, and the second one's called allocating intensity using actual race pace. I'll link those up in the comments for you. What I want to do today is talk a bit about how long we can last in each zone. The reason being, in the most recent article, I start that by saying the most useful form of intensity, i.e. something that's a little peppy, is 1 gear up from average race velocity. So you got your average race pace for whatever your event is, and then 1 gear up is the most useful form of intensity. Intensity meaning something that's a little bit peppy. And this is a different way of looking at things than some of the traditional models, but it comes back to how going fast works in the real world. Now, in the real world, we've got our average pace that we deliver on race day, and we'll have other things in the event, competitive situations, hills, and different things where we have to lift effort. Typically, we're going to be lifting 1 zone up. And so being able to train this ability to lift and then come down is a very practical form of speed in terms of getting faster to the finish line. And so to think about that, we need to understand really what our budget is for these higher efforts when we come to race day. And to start that discussion, I pulled up John's subjective perception chart, and he very usefully talks a bit about, in the overall subjective feeling column, how long, on average, most of us will be able to last in these zones. Now, the green zones, we can last for quite a long time. We can keep the pace up for a long time. Now, what long is different for different athletes. And depending on where we are in the green zone and whether we're dipping into zone 3, you'll find that duration changes. And you need to figure that out for yourself. How long can you sit at a high zone 1 effort, what we call this first threshold, this first lactate threshold effort between zone 1 and zone 2, without decoupling, without the heart rate starting to move away from pace. So either pace is going to drop at the same heart rate, or heart rate is going to rise away from the pace and it's going to move into a higher zone defined by heart rate. So you need to figure that out for all of these zones over time. So let's just start with zone 5. John describes it, very uncomfortable. This pace can only be maintained with difficulty for 6 to 10 minutes. Zone 4, uncomfortable. Depending on fitness level, you can keep this up for 10 to 60 minutes. Zone 3, moderately hard, somewhat uncomfortable. When fit, you can keep this up for 60 to 90 minutes if needed. So one way to think about this is these times are like a max budget in effect. And how durable our fitness is what happens after we go into these higher intensity zones. So if we start using a little bit of zone 5 or a little bit of zone 4, what happens when we come back down into our race pace? Defining race pace in terms of average velocity. And understanding these changes and training these changes can be really helpful for race day for you. One of the things you're going to find is of these more intense zones, 3, 4, and 5, zone 3 is very trainable over time. And why is that? Well, when we do the tempo training, particularly if we have a normal lactate curve, and you can see our lactate chapter for what that means, we can make this zone more aerobic in a sense. We can reduce the metabolic cost of zone 3 by directly targeting it. Now, we need to have very good general fitness for that type of training to work and not make us too tired. And we also need to be strict with ourselves when we target it, because if we think we're targeting zone 3 and then we're moving up into zone 4, we're going to change the nature of that session. So that tempo type training, we talk about that both in the lactate chapter and the training zones chapter. There's a section in there called triangulating your tempo, which is going to help you target that type of training. So duration to fatigue, and the fatigue is going to show by decoupling. And in all your zones, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, you want to build up a portfolio of understanding what that budget is and think about the nature of your average race velocity as well as the course you're going to be racing on, lifting those efforts where it gets you the most bang for your buck. Another video on this is called progressive race pacing. If you're a triathlete or a multi-sport athlete, there's some good ideas in there for where these extra efforts are going to result in the most speed for you on game day. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back with more.